Welcome to the five of us. We are five outspoken women with close to 150 years of experience as broadcast journalists. We left our jobs on the very same day, and we are dedicated to helping women avoid the many pitfalls common to the workplace. We've heard from hundreds of people recounting tales of woe on the job, and we have done the research. We're putting it all in a book, and we are here to help. I'm Roma Torrey, and along with Kristen Shaughnessy, Janine Ramirez, Vivian Lee, and Amanda Farinacci, we are the five of us.
Hi, everyone. We're glad you're with us, and we're doing a little musical chairs. Roma, you're with us over there, and we're going to be talking about good leadership and what it is that good leaders do that inspire the people around them. And you know, when I think of leaders, I actually think of the four of you. And regardless of title or whatever, it's just you're strong women, you're bold, but you're willing to mold your ways if you are presented with other opinions and impressions. And you're really willing to think things through. So I think that's a big thing. So we're going to talk a little bit about what good leaders do that inspire people. And there was this story that I just read, and it was an assistant manager at a McDonald's. And she was nicknamed Mama McDonald by one of the employees, who was named Emmanuel. He's 18 years old. He's a business student at UMass. At one point, he didn't even think he'd go to college, maybe not even graduate from high school. He lost both his parents before the age of 13. Kind of, lost a little bit because he was just trying to find his way. That's a big thing, obviously, for anyone to go through. And she, with her kindness, really takes care of her teenage employees. And so they have really gathered around her. They work hard because of her. And I thought that's the kind of person we're thinking. So this is Andrea de La Rosa, and I thought was a very good example. My brother-in-law, he has hundreds of employees, and his go-to book is Multipliers. And Viv, you can talk a little bit about that because it's a leadership book.
Yeah, so the book divides good bosses and bad bosses into two basic categories. There are the multipliers and there are the diminishers. And the multipliers are known for not having an ego. They don't need to take credit. They like to bring a lot of opinions into the room. And they tend to multiply the profitability or productiveness of their workplaces by double. Diminishers, on the other hand, are usually the loudest. They're very arrogant. They need to know every single thing that you're doing. They need to put their mark on everything that's happening in the workspace, and they diminish productivity by 50%.
Wow.
So this book is by Liz Wiseman. And it actually got me checking around on what people are saying about good and bad bosses. And this article from 2020 in Harvard Business Review by Thomas Chamorro Premuzic talks about how good leaders foster trust and bad leaders cause anxiety. And not only do they cause anxiety, they tend to move up other people who cause anxiety. And it all comes down to one basic problem, which is how good leaders are chosen and bad leaders are chosen. Most people have stories of bad leaders, the studies have shown, over good leaders. And what he's discovered, he teaches business administration at Columbia University, and he's talking about how there are a lot of science-based studies and questionnaires that companies themselves can use to just over time gauge the narcissism of anyone who's being considered for leadership. But the fact remains that a lot of companies choose not to do this because they would rather be seduced. And the seduction factor has been long studied as the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is the result of when a group of people have become seduced by somebody who looks like they are capable, but they're actually incapable. They are overconfident, but that's what they outwardly show, but they're actually insecure. And what they do is they tend to surround themselves with a circle of trust of other similarly overconfident, insecure people.
Yeah. And Janine, you were looking into traits of a good leader, and Viv touched on a lot of those, but it's, a good leader can change a workplace, and just as much as a bad leader can.
Inspire people and bring out loyalty in people, right? If you have a good leader, you just want to, make sure that they're proud of you, right? So it's just like, oh, wow. So they inspire you to do well because they're giving you credit. They're saying you're doing a good job. I really liked it when you did this. And that brings out the best in you. And they give you, they don't micromanage, right? So they're not trying to account for every minute of the day. They're trying to say this is your project, you're good at it, you want to do it, go for it. And they give you this room to grow that at the end of the time, you're like, look what I did. And they get excited for you, right? And then you're bringing a lot to the company. And that inspires you to do more and more and more.
Because your win is their win.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because it's right. And that's how you bring out the team effort, rather than trying to diminish and trying to rule like this, like, what were you doing? How long was your
Amanda
break?
has a very good quote, which goes right along with what you're saying. So let's just bring that in, then we'll go.
Wartime quote, Dwight Eisenhower. You don't lead by hitting people over the head. That's assault, not leadership.
It's exactly what you were just saying.
That's
right?
assault, right?
Yeah.
And then there's like some basic things like, promote from within, like make people feel like they're putting in the time and they have the ability to grow. Because if you feel like you're at a dead end, what's the incentive there? And give everyone credit for the work that they do. Everybody's bringing something to the table. Like a good leader will be like,
Or get rid of them if they're not, right?
Right. But like also to show gratitude. Granted, it's their job, right? It's their job, and they're supposed to be doing this. But thank you for lighting this, because you know what? Like, I really appreciate that. Like, this really changed the game a little bit, and you really added to the whole set. That kind of thing. Like, just be calm. Words matter. Your tone matters, right? Rather than yelling. And we all know that that's definitely a sign of a bad leader. But what's interesting, particularly in our line of work, we're all television journalists, and we always find that the people who knew the best were the people who did all the jobs, right?
I was just thinking that as you said that, because if you know what other people do, you're more appreciative of how the whole product comes together. It really is a team. So,
and there's a show like that. What is it called? It's called like...
Oh, the boss?
Yeah,
Undercover
boss, right?
Boss,
So they're
yeah.
the CEO of the company and have no friggin' idea what the bottom does, right?
Yeah.
Like the people who are just coming in, they're like, and then
they're working hard.
Right,
and,
they're working hard, and they're like, they're entry level, but the CEO sometimes never did the entry level work.
That a lot that goes along with, I think more and more we're seeing that companies are being run by people who have no clue what the actual work entails. And so they're bringing people in who maybe went to the Wharton Business School and they're good with numbers, but they don't know the actual nitty-gritty. And I think one of the problems in many workplaces is that the underlings know more than the bosses, and then you lose trust, and then the whole dynamic changes, and like who wants to work with a guy who doesn't know
the business,
or what your value is, right? So I think that's a problem that needs to be addressed, and it seems to me getting worse and worse.
And workers can be positively influenced by good leaders. Like you said, you kind of would run through a brick wall for somebody if you're really inspired by them, and it really does, show in the bottom line too for a company.
Yeah, I mean, to Vivian's point, if you have a bad leader, I think we've all done how many interviews for the book, and we've spoken to people, and they've all described a sense of dread and anxiety and just sickness when they work someplace for somebody who just sets the tone, that's just creates the toxic culture. But on the flip side of that, if you have a good boss, a good leader, I mean, how do you describe a sense of like the high morale that you encounter in an office when you're being led by somebody you can trust, someone who trusts you, someone who is challenging you, but also getting the best out of you, pushing you to do your best work, someone you're learning from. There are studies that have shown that positive leadership leads, as I mentioned, to high morale, to employee retention. People want to hang out, they want to stay, they want to work for the person who puts them in a good mood and makes them feel good about their work.
And sometimes they're willing to take less money,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because they're so happy at their jobs that they'd rather say like, okay, I'm not getting paid as much as if I went to this other company, but I have some freedom, I have some flexibility, they trust me, I like it here.
Right, and that's the last one, right? So it leads to sustainable long-term success, right? Because you will stay somewhere where you feel valued, where your work is important, where people are telling you, we value you and your work is important, and that's a game changer. I think that's a game changer. The other thing I think that we should mention about a good leader is really just, in my opinion, a person who recognizes that yes, you're doing a job, but you're also a human being, right? So that like, not to be micromanaged, but also just like life is happening while you're working as well, right? So you have a boss who has, we all have kids, we have families, we've got any number of things that go on a daily basis. And that kind of stuff, if you have a bad boss, maybe is not tolerated. But if you have a good boss who can understand the humanity of his or her employees, I think that really goes a long way towards making people feel good about where they're working and who they're working for.
And with this, let's just go around and just good bosses that you have had, right? Because everybody sort of complains about a bad boss, but we don't always talk about the good ones because we just sort of are like, oh, it's good, life's good, but you don't really give them the credit.
They're few and far between.
Yeah.
Actually.
So let's run. Have you had a boss that you're like, wow,
Well, in contrast to what I was just describing, which is a workplace where the bosses have no clue what the work is really all about, in my early days, after working in many newsrooms, and I arrived at one newsroom, and you guys probably would experience this. How many times do you hear your news director say, I want no more than 90 seconds on a story? Your packaged reports have to be 90 seconds, no more. If you're a second over, I'm gonna reject it. So when I started at one particular newsroom, we asked that question, how long do you want our reports to be? And the response was, if you do a story that takes 90 seconds to report, but you could have gone 3 minutes and it would have been much better, I'm going to come down on you and say, why wasn't it 3 minutes? Conversely, if you spend 3 minutes telling a story that really shouldn't have gone more than 90 seconds, well, then I'm going to come down on you for that. Anyway, the point is, that is a good leader because it's based on, case by case as opposed to, some concrete rule that doesn't necessarily apply in all situations. To me, that's a good leader.
How about you, Janine?
Well, I think that realizing what everybody brings to the table, because not everybody has the same talent set or skill set. So, you're good at this, you want to do this, again, go for it. Go for it, show me what you got. Give them room to breathe and grow and get excited over something rather than minimizing what they're bringing to the table. Just the freedom, to this is what you love to do it.
Yeah. Anybody have a good boss story or?
I do. I remember one time being out on a story and I had a producer tell me, I don't know if the way you spoke to the crew, because I heard you off camera, was really, really good. And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, well, I heard you say this and this. I know you're under pressure and I know I was leaning on you, so you're just responding to that. I want to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what that made you go through. And I didn't hear the rest of it because I was just so stunned that she said sorry. And as we continued working through the years, she showed on many occasions that she was emotionally intelligent enough to know when she had done something wrong, and nobody took advantage of her for that because she was really judicious in when she apologized, and she did it in a very genuine way. It was like, I acknowledge that I totally screwed up, and I'm letting you know that you need an apology, you need to hear it, I'm going to give it to you. And she turned out to be the best producer, superior that I ever worked for in the news business. And she's always been held up as the standard.
Interesting.
I think the best boss or the best leader is the person who doesn't try to sugarcoat when things are not going well as well. I think if you are in a bad situation and everybody knows the shit's hitting the fan, I think it goes a really long way to people at all levels underneath whoever's in charge when the person at the top says, look, I know this sucks, but we got to get through it, right? I think it equalizes everybody in a way that would inspire people to do their best, because you're not up there saying this isn't happening, right? Nobody wants to be, what is the expression now, gaslit? Nobody wants that. It's not in any form. So
because you all know.
Yeah, everybody knows, look, we're in it right now.
We had a situation, it was a weekend, and the executive producer or the producer couldn't come in. So, and there was only a couple of us anyway working the shift, and the big boss came in and got down started writing stories, and I was like, wow, that impressed me because he knew every facet of the business and he wasn't afraid to do the work.
You didn't feel like he didn't trust anybody to do it as well?
Oh, no, he came in, he was like, you do this, I'll do this.
You needed the extra hand.
You needed the extra hand, and he just, he did his part.
He knew the job.
And he knew the job. It was really impressive. And the other one, I'm going back, when I was a teenager, I used to work in an ice cream stand, and it was run by a woman, and she would do all the work. And I was 14 years old, I think, and I was like so I felt so privileged to be asked to work at this particular like hot ice cream stand, right? So I was like, all right. But she would be like pouring in the buckets and like carrying the heavy buckets. And that to me shows like you have to know the business from the ground up. And it really makes a difference. So.
And sometimes you don't know a good boss unless you had a bad boss, right? Sometimes, right? You'll go to a job and you're out of college. You're just like, all right, so this manager is talking badly about the employees. I guess that's normal, but it's not normal, right? To normalize that, that's bad behavior. That's like really poor management skills to be outwardly talking about another employee in front, badly. But you won't know that.
Right.
You might think, oh, this is how it works. This is work life.
No.
Right. No.
That might explain why younger people today have no problem skipping around from job to job, because they know what a good boss is versus a not so good one. And maybe that's because of social media. I mean, this whole digital revolution.
They call people out on social media.
People are talking about, who's good and who's bad, and that they don't have to take a bad boss anymore. They don't have to deal with a toxic situation. So
To that
helps.
point, there's now something called, there's a website called Great Places to Work.
Oh, yeah.
That hands out awards to
I like that.
companies based on surveys that are put out to employees. They fill it in, and it's starting to gain some traction where companies are recognizing, oh, this is like Glassdoor without getting like dumped on with a lot of criticism.
It's the
This is
positive
the
Glassdoor.
opposite.
Yeah.
We should be reaching for this. We should be paying attention to what these surveys are asking of their employees. And post-pandemic, a lot of HR departments, they feel like they need to figure out a way to make the work-life experience or workplace experience a lot more enjoyable, so that people are not skipping out, ghosting, taking off after barely a year on the job. I mean, the younger generation, Generation Z and millennials, they know that they're living in a time where they don't have to take what some older generations just took lying down, really, which was, put up with it, suck it up, be quiet, don't rock the boat, until, of course, you get to a certain age and then you do want to rock the boat. But I think that, in a lot of ways, is how social media has helped this conversation.
Yeah.
But I think going on that, I think that's how you make a better leader. Also, is having. Why is it always the managers, giving a review on the employees on their
360 assessments, right?
Exactly. The 360 assessment. So now the employees should write. I mean, we've had great supervisors that we've seen, that we've worked with, that it would be great if management, upper management would say, like, what do you think about your immediate supervisor? And you would actually say, you know what, great. And then if they're not so great, being like, there should be a back and forth, because I think that should be taken to the manager and saying, like, listen, here's what your employees in general, not single them out, of course, so they're not targeted for any kind of retaliation, but kind of say, like, this is, here are your strengths. Here's what the staff appreciates about you that you're doing right, or that that is working, and here's what's not working, so that they become better leaders.
Yeah, and we're talking about men and women in either leadership positions or just leaders in the workplace without a title, perhaps. But let's talk about women specifically. And there's research here that shows women are really good leaders in a lot of ways.
Yeah, across the board. I have to go back a few years ago. I interviewed Alan Alda, and I'm not quite sure why we were talking about this, but we were live on the air, and he came out with this statement and he said, you do know that women make the best bosses. Women are the most competent. And I kind of thought at the time, well, he's talking to a woman, maybe he's kind of blowing smoke, But I found that there really is research that kind of proves that women do make better managers in general, of course. I mean, there's always exceptions. But Gallup put out a survey, and they said that women have a clear edge when it comes to engagement. And engagement, they said, is the most important factor when empowering employees to achieve excellence in the workplace. And what goes along with that is the sense of there's an emotional component, that when a worker is engaged or inspired to be engaged by a manager, they put a sense of passion and they feel an ownership toward the work that they're doing in the job and their fellow workers, and they kind of it's like a wonderful harmony that's created with this kind of dynamic in the workplace. And they said that women by far are able to achieve that in a workplace more than men. There was another area where they said women excelled, and that is in the area of development. That women are far more likely to follow, women managers, to follow an employee through their career, making sure that they achieve their goals and that they're following through step by step whatever the job is that they were required to do. Men have more of a sort of a hands-off attitude toward it, but a lot of workers say when the boss is following their development and their career, they feel like they're more committed to the job. So for all those reasons, now Harvard Business Review kind of put an exclamation point on all of that because they looked at, they call them competencies in a workplace from the perspective of manager. And they said that women lead men in 84% of the competencies. Women, just in general, just seem to have a better grasp of what it is to inspire their employees to do the best job that they can. And they did point out, though, that there are two areas where men are a little bit better than women, and that is, I had to write it down, men do a better job developing strategic perspective and technical or professional expertise. Whatever that means, I'm not quite sure. But anyway, the downside to all of this is interesting is that not a lot of women feel engaged themselves in the workplace. And I was trying to figure out why is that, and maybe it has to do with the fact that there are far more male managers out there than female managers, and so maybe women feel like they're pushed to the sidelines.
Yeah, it's not capability, right? It's opportunity.
Very good. Yeah,
Right.
I mean that's
I mean,
a
if
really
you
good
think
point.
about this, though, who runs the household?
Right.
Right? Like, who's doing
The
the
multitasking.
organizing, the
Yeah.
work, the food, the kid, the laundry, the whatever, right? We're doing all that. And then we're going to work. And, like, I don't know about you guys, but I have a nicely run household, I think. Everybody would agree that we have I have things run pretty smooth. And when I'm not in charge, things can get a little hazy, right?
Dave, Maddie, Annabelle.
But I'm being serious. Like, I when I hear people talk about this, like that there's some surprise in the idea that women are better leaders. I'm like, look in your own house.
I agree.
And who is in charge and why does it work, right? And so,
how many lists do you have to write when you go out of town?
I mean, yeah, but
Exactly.
Exactly.
3 o'clock, this happens.
Right,
3:30, this
right,
happens.
And
right.
women tend to also handle the financials.
Yes.
Yes,
Like they usually
true in my house also.
paying the bill,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Paying the
Mine too.
bills and what's
Yeah.
coming in and what's coming
too.
out. Yeah,
Right,
Like,
right. So why are we so surprised? Right. This is why women who have maybe questions about, I don't know, leadership or whatever, like should say, I'm already doing it. This is just a bigger scale.
There's one unfortunate aspect to all of this, and that is, according to these surveys, and Gallup found that a majority of women managers don't have the same confidence that men have in their abilities to do a good job. And so when they were questioned, they said women from the age of 25 up to about 40 rate themselves at a much lower level than the male counterparts. But when women get to the age of 40, all of a sudden the numbers merge, and women are as confident and start to be even more confident than their male counterparts and their colleagues in the job, which speaks volumes.
I think there's just a dearth of women leaders.
Yes.
Right? And starting from a very young age. So they're not given leadership roles, even when they show their capabilities in their 20s and 30s. And then if they do take a leadership role, studies have shown that same article that I was talking about from Chamorro Pramusic in Harvard Business Review, he also quoted a study where he talked about how when wrongdoing is pegged on someone, male leaders tend to be taken down and accused and investigated less than female leaders. They are held to a higher standard, even though there are fewer of them. And by definition, if there are more male leaders and there's wrongdoing, you would think there would be more wrongdoing in that group that's represented more, the males. But there's less of a tendency for companies to want to go after a male leader for wrongdoing. So, there's already a tip scale in that regard.
I mean, in regard to the merging of confidence at 40, I mean, you see people start to speak up. And then we also have had podcasts on ageism, right? And so women are feeling ageism more. Well, when they're speaking up, all of a sudden they don't like it. If you're looking at the top and it's mostly men who don't like women speaking up, the confidence merges at that point.
And that's when they start to get rid of the women.
Yeah,
Well,
and
there's
that might
also
be
this-
why you have a dearth of women leaders. Right.
And there's always the good old boy club that still
Right.
exists. Like, let's not
Yeah,
pretend it doesn't.
yeah, it certainly
Yeah,
is.
I have
Who's
to.
playing golf with the boss?
I have to put an asterisk to all of this because, we're not saying that women necessarily are better than men across the
Well,
board.
there are toxic
there's
women
there's
bosses.
terrible
when
women
it comes,
bosses. Yeah.
right, and we've experienced this, there are some really, when women are bad bosses, they are the holy terror. They are the absolute worst. And, my theory about all of this is that, because I think about this a lot, why can women be such ogres, right, to each other, too? That Madeleine Albright thing, a special place in heaven for women who don't help other women. There are a lot of women who don't help other women who are in C-suites at the top of their game. And I think part of it is that some women feel that in order for them to excel, they have to emulate the qualities of men that they think make the men so effective in their jobs, and ruthlessness, competitiveness, toughness. And so they end up suppressing what may be a sort of a more natural behavior or tendency, empathy, nurturing qualities. And so I think maybe that's where women go wrong. And so I'm putting it out there. You women, women bosses, don't try to be who you're not. Try, realize that, this is we're a community here, and that whole nature of it takes, or the whole notion it takes a village. It really does, and it's not you against everybody else. I think the best workplaces go along with the notion that it takes a team to build a good workplace.
You with everyone else,
Yeah.
yeah. And with that, I'm going to close out on this quote because it sort of goes, the female prime minister of New Zealand. I'm going to put on my glasses for this, but she said, one of the criticisms I've faced over the years is that I'm not aggressive enough or assertive enough, or maybe somehow because I'm empathetic, it means I'm weak.
Ah.
I totally rebel against that. I refuse to believe that you cannot be both compassionate and strong.
There you go. Bravo.
So with that, thank you guys for guiding me through my first time leading. Thank you, Roma, for giving me the opportunity, and it's been a good conversation. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to The Five of Us. We want to hear from you with any questions, ideas, or suggestions for future discussions. Just write to us at the emails you see here, and we will be eager to help. Talk to you next time.